Hello, and welcome to this introduction, designed to explain the historical scenario in which our upcoming title, Imperator Rome, takes place. My name's Peter Nicholson, content designer.
And I'm Henrik Lomander, game designer.
As you can see, the Imperator map is, to date, one of the most detailed representations we've ever attempted in a Paradox grand strategy game, encompassing the entire Hellenistic world and stretching from the Scottish Highlands to modern-day Burma.
The map has been divided into nearly 7,000 unique administrative units, each with their own number of pops that represent the local population. They have their own culture, religion, and different specializations. This sets the scene for an enormously detailed world, one where tyrants, emperors, and consuls can have an effect not only on the larger scale of things, but also on a local level.
The granularity with which we've chosen to portray the world has allowed us an unprecedented level of control over the composition of the various city-states and nations at our start date. For instance, in the city of Alexandria, the population consists of Macedonian, Phoenician and Hebrew pops, yet with surrounding cities being largely composed of pops of Egyptian culture.
This brings us comfortably to the nation of Egypt, conquered by Alexander the Great and now ruled by Ptolemy, one of his generals. One of 5 great successors to Alexander's empire.
Indeed, a mere 25 years previously, Philip of Macedon masterminded the creation of a league of states known as the League of Corinth, planning to lead a massive invasion of the powerful Persian Empire.
Before he was able to act, Philip was murdered by one of his own, leaving the young Alexander in charge. Alexander reshaped the League of Corinth into a formidable fighting force and invaded the gigantic Persian Empire.
In just 10 years, the undefeated Alexander had conquered the entirety of the once great empire, controlling Anatolia, the fertile Nile Delta, the rich lands of Assyria and Babylon, and had marched his armies to the very edge of the known world, reaching the Indus Valley.
At this point, it is said that Alexander's own army refused to go further, forcing him to return to Babylon on a very arduous trip through Gedrosia.
In 323 BCE, Alexander died suddenly following a brief illness, leaving no heir apparent to succeed him. The partition of Babylon occurred shortly thereafter, which was a seminal meeting designed to split the various territories of Alexander's conquests amongst those most deserving. However, without an obvious leader, the vast empire descended into strife, with many of Alexander's closest friends turning on one another, desperate to etch their own names into the annals of history.
Nearly 20 years of bitter conflict followed between the various satraps, governors and generals had built Alexander's empire. A struggle that in the end left 5 Diadochi or successors in control of his empire.
A year or two prior to the beginning of Imperator Rome, the Diadochi and various other important players in the Hellenistic world had begun proclaiming themselves Basileus, or king, perhaps finally recognizing that the dream of reuniting the entirety of the Argead Empire was too ambitious a goal to be considered realistic.
Cassander, the son of Antipater, was a particularly ruthless leader, even by the standards of his contemporaries. Having been denied the throne by his father, he allied with his father's enemies and killed the regent appointed by Antipater.
Cassander was also responsible for the murder of Alexander's widow, Roxana, and only surviving heir, Alexander IV, effectively ending any threats from the great emperor's bloodline. Cassander begins in fierce dispute over the various leagues and city-states to the south of Macedonia, but in control of a fierce and proud nation with a heritage to reclaim.
LYSIMACHUS grew up alongside Alexander and was awarded the title satrap of Thrace at the Council of Babylon, leaving him in control of an unruly area and one always at the risk of being invaded from the north.
Lysimachus maintained good relations with many minor players in the theatre of war, involving himself in all manner of intrigue and politics, such as support of the young King Pyrrhus in Epirus.
The Antigonid Empire, ruled by the competent and successful commander Antigonus MONOPHTHALMUS, the One-Eyed, closely supported by son Demetrius, had carved out a large kingdom in Anatolia and Syria. Numerous satraps and subjects relied on Antigonus for support, both bolstering and weakening the Phrygian strategic situation in equal measure.
Antigonus was, by all accounts, a competent and successful commander, having secured various victories against the other Diadochi. Most recently, the entire Ptolemaic navy was destroyed in the famous Battle of Salamis by Demetrius, who went on to secure the entirety of Cyprus.
Such success was in the end the author of Antigonus' downfall. At the dawn of our game's start, the other Diadochi, wickedly jealous of the continued successes of Antigonus, had begun to meet, promising each other the support and for the inevitable war against Antigonus and his son Demetrius.
Seleucus Nicator, as he was styled, was the very definition of a self-made man. Having served as a junior officer under Alexander, he was rewarded greatly at the partition of Babylon, though did not receive the highly sought-after control of land that he desired.
As machinations continued throughout the decades between Alexander's death and our start date, Seleucus maneuvered with consummate skill. Going from commander to general to governor, Seleucus rose quickly and was often assisted by one or the other Diadochi.
As we begin, Seleucus stands in control of the largest of the successor states, and with subjects such as Parthia and Bactria representing the outermost regions of his empire. Despite the situation in Anatolia, Seleucus took a great interest in India, at this point ruled by the nascent Mauryan Empire, having prepared an invasion force in 305 BC.
Ptolemy SOTER of the Lagid dynasty is said to have been a childhood friend of Alexander. Under the partition of Babylon, he sought and was named satrap of Egypt, a position that he then consolidated for decades before our game begins.
Despite numerous invasions of rival successors, Egypt would remain safe under Ptolemy's rule, with the majority of conflicts involving the Ptolemaic armies occurring outside the Egyptian region.
Ptolemy and Antigonus had a long-standing rivalry, fighting land and naval battles for control of Syria as well as the many strategic islands of the Mediterranean. Ptolemy seems to have understood that good relations with the indigenous people of Egypt was vital for his success, and he invested heavily in infrastructure and in local culture as well as in settling Greek warriors all over Egypt.
The city of Rome is already an impressive 450 years old in 305 BCE, but its rise to greatness has only been in motion for the last 40 years. After becoming the premier city of the Latin League, Rome managed to defeat and expand at the expense of the Samnite League to its south. The Second Samnite War has just closed with Rome as the clear winner against a unified Samnite-Etrurian alliance.
The Etrurians, or Etruscans especially, have been the dominant force in this region up until now, with an Etruscan king even ruling Rome many generations ago. In many ways, Rome itself is a result of the interchange between the Greek south and the Etruscan north. But the Republic has now quickly grown and is surpassing both in influence and in military power.
While Rome rises in Italy, and the titanic kingdoms of the Diadochi clash in the east, the western Mediterranean remains under the hegemony of the Carthaginian Empire, once a mere colony of the Phoenician state of Tyre. For hundreds of years, Carthage has held dominion over the sea, building a lucrative trade network lacking any major challenges to their rule.
Carthaginian or Punic traders and settlers have by now clashed many times with their Greek and Etruscan counterparts in Hispania, southern Gaul, Sicily and Sardinia. As our period opens, Carthage has more or less established themselves as the dominant power in Hispania and among the islands, while the Greek city-state of Massalia still controls southern Gaul.
At sea, there is really no longer anyone to challenge the Carthaginian hegemony, and as a result, Carthage has begun to pick sides and try to play the local powers in Italy against each other. Just a short time before our start date, they helped the Etruscans take control over eastern Corsica from the Greeks, and at times they would side with Rome.
At the start of our game, Carthage has been embroiled in a long conflict over Sicily against the native Greek tyrant Agathocles, one that has almost caused a coup d'etat in Carthage itself, with the rebels eventually crucified, marking the beginnings of the Carthaginian Republic. With the stability restored, Carthage can once again look to expand its influence in Hispania and Italy, clearly putting them on a collision course with the rising Roman Republic.
In India, the rise of the Mauryan Empire under Chandragupta Maurya was well underway, having recently overthrown the Nanda Empire which once controlled much of the region. Positioning his empire to grow to be the hegemonic power of the subcontinent, Chandragupta has moved his capital to Pataliputra in the heartland of the old Nanda realm.
As our period opens up, the Mauryan Empire has just finished a campaign to conquer the northern Indus Valley from the Seleucids and stand ready to continue to expand west into the Seleucid lands of Bactria, Gedrosia and Ariana. A conflict that was to be ended by an agreement between the Seleucids and Mauryans, granting the Mauryas land in exchange for a secure peace and 500 war elephants, animals that Seleucus would historically put to use against Antigonus in the west.
With the western border secure, the Mauryans are free to focus on consolidating their gains and to expand south. Historically, Chandragupta and his successors would end up expanding their realm to cover almost the entire Indian subcontinent. As the player, you will be thrust into this living world, where it's up to you to decide which of the successor states emerges victorious, and whether Rome will rise in glory or is smothered in her cradle.